What's up, guys? Welcome to the Metal Roofing Channel. Welcome to Q&A Mondays. This is part one of a two-part series all about working with general contractors. In the commercial construction world, an architect draws up plans, works with a general contractor, and that GC hires subcontractors to actually complete the different phases of building. In this part one, we're gonna talk about how to develop relationships with general contractors as a subcontractor. And in part two, we're gonna learn how to submit the most effective proposal possible. Today, I've got Bob LaRosa, the Director of Building Development at JL Moore, a local GC here in Northeast Ohio. Thanks for being here, Bob.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, today we're talking about relationships, right? And in the commercial building space, really in any building space, when you're working with different trades, different companies, that relationship building is so important. So can you tell me a little bit from a general contractor's perspective, what are some of the most important things that you look for in subcontractors that you work with?
Sure. Yeah, it really all starts with that proposal when they get that to us, responding to a bid. We're always looking for, a very well spelled out proposal that shows us that they understand the entire scope and that they have it covered. Then I think beyond that, if there's follow-up questions from our estimating department, that there's a quick response back, because usually we're fighting a deadline.
Sure, yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the bid process, because this is actually a two-part series. In the second video, we're gonna talk about the entire bidding phase and tips for that. But yeah, let's talk more about that communication aspect, because once that proposal is submitted, if you do have questions, it's important for a timely response. What other communication tips do you have, and what do you look for in the realm of communication with subcontractors?
Yeah, ideally, again, that proposal is pretty self-explanatory. We're moving 100 miles an hour. Roofing's just one division of multiple things that we're gonna have to understand. And we may be going through over 100 bids in a 24-hour period to get our number ready.
Yeah.
So the clearer that proposal is, the easier it makes our life. If we do have follow-up questions to make sure you've got covered, just clear communication. So, getting back to our estimator, and sometimes they're hard to catch because they're following up with other people. So,
sure.
It's probably a voicemail back, and then maybe even responding back to that email, if you're able to answer the question, if it was left on your voicemail, would be helpful.
It sounds like it's a learning process too. After your second or third bid, and you kind of learn, you make sure that everything is on there and make it as easy as possible for the estimator. Because like you said, you're under a tight timeline as well. So I think any little thing could help that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even prior to submitting the proposal, maybe there's RFI questions that the subcontractor would have. Email's always going to be the best submission for us, because the estimators are slammed, they're on and off the phone. So when they can get to your email and respond, and then, to ideally be able to pick your phone up when they do call, because sometimes it's a short window.
Yeah, 100%. So, if from all the subcontractors that you've worked with, not just roofing, as you mentioned, what are some habits that would serve someone well who's working with the GC, or maybe some examples that you've seen of subcontractors that have really stood out in your process?
No, good question. Everyone talks about it, but value engineering, right? So the more information you can give us, if there's an alternate that makes sense, maybe they're trying to get Sheffield Metals product spec even, to give us that, get us a cut sheet, get us the savings that it would offer. I think the other real important thing would be if there's lead times,
Sure.
If there's a long lead item or something that we need to know about. Because again, they're just one piece of this bid that we need to prepare, and we need to be able to go tell our client the full story when we get that number right.
Yeah, because that information has to pass through multiple different levels. So to make sure that that's front and center, if there's anything to be aware of, super important. Yeah, it makes total sense. And from the value engineering perspective, I've got an example that we did a building on the east side that was spec'd aluminum. But it had all the requirements. Steel would have been fine. right?
Okay.
So we were able to swap that out, use steel instead of aluminum, and save the project some money. So an example like that could be a big deal to include in your information.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And just make sure you include it as, like a deduct alternate. So give us the base bid per the specs, and then give us that deduct alternate. And with whatever information, whatever advantage to that product is, and then we'll present that, to our client, because it helps us. And then, would follow back up if more information was needed, if there was some interest in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how does someone get into the commercial space? If I'm a roofing company and I'm looking to do more commercial work, looking to submit bids, how do I establish relationships with general contractors? What's the beginning process look like for me?
Yeah, to me, that beginning process is getting on our bid list. So even right from our website, we have a subcontractor tab. You can click on that and you can register with us. Then you're going to start seeing opportunities from us. And through the bidding process, it allows you to start to tell your story, right? Even submitting things with your bid as far as, relevant projects, experience. We are always looking for good subcontractors. A brand new company without some history to that, is risky for us.
Sure.
But if you're a brand new company and you spent, your last 10 years at a bigger, well-known company, let us know that, because then it gives us the confidence to be able to, we're using this number and it's a great price because maybe it's a little newer company, they're smaller overhead, but they have the experience of a large company.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then, let's say a contractor wins a bid and we're actually on the project. What are some tips that you have for me, as far as maintaining that relationship with the GC all the way through?
Sure. I think it's always going to be communication. Making sure you're communicating with the on-site superintendent, the project manager who's quarterbacking the job. Really it's the delivering on what you promised in the bid, the timing of it, the pricing of it, if you can let people know about how long that project's going to take for your scope of it. But really just making sure, besides kind of some of the obvious stuff, keeping a clean job site, making sure that if there's going to be interaction with other trades, or you need something done prior to your arrival or, quickly after your completion, that's communicated, to the on-site superintendent so things can be coordinated.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, I keep coming back to that, the bid process, because that is so important to make sure that if I'm a roofer, I'm doing my homework up front so that when I submit my bid, if that bid is accepted, I can perform it from start to finish as written, or at least in the best way that I possibly can. Because otherwise, if I shortchange myself, that eats into my own profits as a roofing company, and it also can damage the relationship with the GC. Yeah,
absolutely. If the subcontractor's lack of ability to perform is really going to hurt things, right? It's the transparency is going to be more important to understand. And every job's a little different. There are jobs where maybe a smaller subcontractor that may take longer is fine. But there are some jobs where we have to hire a little larger subcontractor because we need the workforce, we need the speed. So it just depends, project specific.
Sure. So if I'm newer to the commercial space and I don't have very many general contractor contacts, how do I find GCs?
Yeah, so most GCs like ourselves will, we send out the bid invitations directly, but if you're not in our database, the good way to find out about us would be, there's other services out there, the Builders Exchange, the Dodge Report, Plan Hub, there's a lot of reporting services, and we will usually list our projects on there. We don't tie our blueprints or anything to that. You actually have to get a bid invitation directly from us, but that'd be a good way to find some of the local general contractors. That, and obviously when you're driving around, when you see job sites, if you're not familiar with that GC, go get on their bidders list.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, to start keeping a list and then building those relationships from there. So what are some things that someone shouldn't do as a subcontractor? Are there any mistakes to avoid that maybe I wouldn't think about right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly, I can't tell you how many proposals we've looked at that there's no contact person or email address. So we may go back, maybe we win this job and it's 4 weeks after we bid it. The project manager now is going to buy out the job, and he probably doesn't even have an email from the subcontractor. He just has the proposal. So now he doesn't even have the contact info. So, I mean, simple things, but it should be very evident when we look at that proposal. Who do I call if I have questions about this? Or who do I call if it's actually time to hire the roofing subcontractor and we want to start having a conversation? So I'd say that would be number one. And then again, back to that clear, concise, it should be pretty obvious when we look at the proposal, that's covered, and some bullet, not just per plans and specs. There's got to be some, usually breakout is really helpful.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the actual proposal in the next video. I want to make sure you stay tuned for that. It sounds like there's three main things to think about. There's a proposal like we talked about. There's communication and just being generally easy to work with. Any way that a subcontractor can make it easy for a GC to work with them is going to be a big plus. And then the third thing is actually being able to perform the work in a timely manner like you put forth.
Absolutely. And I mean, as you start building those relationships with us, so we usually have an open house once a year. If it's possible, swing by. It's a good time to meet the estimators. It is always possible, but very random, so you're risking it. But if you're in the area, you can stop in our office and ask to be introduced to, someone in the estimating department, so that we understand you're more than just a proposal. So that's a part of it. But again, I caution that, we're just very busy, right? Like everyone else, we're trying to do, more with less people, and just need to be conscious that, you show up and it could be a bid day and there's no way anyone can talk to you.
Yeah, I hear you. So speaking of that, how can people learn more about your company, JL Moore?
Yeah, I mean, I think our website is we actually just got it updated, so that's a very good way to get a pretty good pulse for us. And then following our LinkedIn page would make a lot of sense. We tend to post a lot of information there also.
All right, well, thank you, Bob. Really appreciate the information, and best of luck with the rest of the year.
Absolutely, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, Bob. Bye. If you have any questions, comment down below. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2 of this series, where we talk about how to submit an effective proposal to a general contractor. Subscribe here to the Metal Roofing channel. As always, I'm Thad Barnette. We'll catch you next time.